Welcome to Cinema Creep, a Black Mass Films podcast where we dissect all things vile, disgusting, and downright terrifying in the world of horror cinema. So this is episode 2, and as always, I'm one of your hosts, Justin James, and of course, I am joined by...
What's up, guys? I'm Andrew Henderson, and I am the co-host tonight,
always the co-host. So tonight's episode is going to be really awesome. I've actually been waiting. I couldn't wait to get this one done because we are diving deep into a film. Pun very intended there. But a quick shout out real quick to our sponsor, of course, Everblack Coffee. Go to everblackcoffee.com. You can order the Coffin Shaker Light Roast or the Black Magic Dark Roast. So, what have you been doing between now and last episode? You watched anything new real quick?
Yeah, guys, so I've watched a bunch of crap, but what I want to talk about real quick is I want to talk about this series they have on Shudder called The Core. And The Core, what it is they'll have guests on there that are either they're in the world of horror, whether they're filmmakers or special effects artists. But the very last episode, if you guys watch it, there's only one season, has Danzig from the Misfits on there. And he's just a super interesting guy. So they just interview him and they talk about his role he played in a lot of the Misfits music videos and stuff like that. And apparently I didn't know that he did a lot of directing and camera operating. So he talks about that. He talks about his comic books or his graphic novels that he has and some of his plans for adapting those into like a TV anthology in the future. But real quick, there was news today on the Misfits that I saw, and I want to get your opinion on this, Justin. And did you know that this is via Loudwire and a couple other of those music publications online that you can own a piece of Misfits royalties from 3 albums? Did you know that? So right now...
Is Earth AD one of those albums?
Right now, they have a bidding price of $71,200 for 3 records.
Never mind.
That is essentially you're buying the rights. And, it is American Psycho, Famous Monsters, and Cuts from the Crypt. So you're basically paying money for a royalty exchange. So what this means is you're going to get royalties that come from sales, streaming, and sync rights. And you'll basically be getting kickbacks starting September 30th, 2020. So, as much as I've always wanted to be a part of the Misfits, I think this is the next best thing. So if I had $72,000, maybe I would bid on this.
I mean, that's interesting, but that's a hell of a lot of money. So, I love the Misfits. You and I are both huge Misfits fans. That's the only band tattoo that I have is my Fiend skull, but I also don't have that kind of money just lying around. So
that seems kind of low too, though, if you think about it, for like Misfits royalties, 71,000. I mean, I know that they're not like the Beatles or some shit like that, but
they are of horror punk.
Well, they are to like us and to like sub-genre music. But I mean, the thing about it is, I don't know, you figure those royalties for those 3 albums, especially like Famous Monsters. I mean, we can debate about Famous Monsters all day long.
I love the album.
But being such a mainstream album, though, you figured that would alone would bring a bigger price tag.
Well, too, and just real quick, we're not trying to talk about, we could talk about music for hours too, but I mean, a lot of elitists give that album a lot of shit, right? But the quality of that album is, the sonic quality is amazing. And I love all the Misfits stuff. I love all the Misfits albums, but if you go back and listen to their early stuff, they were these, little punk kids, didn't have a whole lot of money to record, and the recording quality is just not there. And then of course, Famous Monsters is definitely sonically produced better. But that is interesting though. That's so if any of you guys are interested in owning a piece of some Misfits musical history and getting some royalties, now's your chance.
So before we hop off of this topic, real quick, Justin, famous or favorite? What is your favorite Misfits song of all time?
Of all time.
Of all time, like if you could only play one, what is your favorite Misfits song?
Probably. I don't know. I'm gonna have to go with "Teenagers from Mars." Probably
That's a good one.
either
That's
that
a good
or
one.
well, it's because I don't want to be super cliche and go with like, most people like when they think of the Misfits, it's like "Die My Darling" and stuff like that. Well, Metallica kind of brought that one into the mainstream with their cover of it and stuff. But yeah, "Teenagers from Mars" or "I Turned Into a Martian."
Those are fucking epic picks. Like those are probably up there in my top. My favorites are either going to be Some Kind of Hate.
Yep.
Love that one. And 20 Eyes. I love 20 Eyes
20
just
Eyes
because it's
is
so
good.
catchy. Like if I see right now that I've said 20 Eyes, it makes me want to go around just start singing that song for like the next 3 days straight.
Right.
So yeah. All right. Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So definitely check out The Core in that last episode where Glenn Danzig goes into great detail, some inside Misfits information. Super cool.
that is interesting.
What have you watched between the last episode and now?
Well, speaking of docuseries, I watched all 5 episodes of Cursed Films. The Crow episode was definitely, I don't know, that one to me. Okay, have you finished it, or are you still on?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
I haven't,
then
but you
never
can go
mind.
ahead and run through it.
Well, I mean, all of the episodes have their own like kind of feel. I didn't really care for the last one, which is the Twilight Zone episode, but the Poltergeist and the Crow, those two stood out to me the most. That's all I'm gonna say. Those two are just have the darkest tone. I feel like the Omen episode was almost kind of just like meh. I mean, it wasn't bad. It was just kind of, I don't feel like it was as serious of a tone.
Right.
The Poltergeist was definitely the most serious and somber, and then the Crow has some dark, like they show some continuity photos of Brandon Lee, like when he was covered in blood and stuff, and it's like just seeing those images and how raw they are, and then knowing the subject matter of the episode, and then they actually dive into how it happened, because there's a lot of like speculation about certain things, but they actually scientifically show what happened. So
I'm gonna have to watch that episode.
yeah, but great series. It's on Shudder, Cursed Films. We talked about it in the last episode. And then as far as the movie, we're not going to talk about this long at all. If you guys haven't seen it, you need to go check out Tammy and the T-Rex. It's probably the goofiest film you're ever going to see. It's one of Paul Walker's first films, if not his very first. I'm not sure. It's got Denise Richards in it. Basically, Paul Walker is in a coma. His body is kidnapped by a mad scientist, and then his brain is put into a robotic T-Rex. And then he kills people. So that's Tammy and the T-Rex.
I've never seen it. But I'm fully sold on it. So I'm definitely going to watch that this week.
It's not a horror film. It's definitely like almost kind of the way I explained it to my fiance was if you take Clueless and Carnosaur, if any of you have ever seen like the Roger Corman Carnosaur, take that and Clueless and put it in a blender, you have Tammy and the T-Rex. So yeah, that's all we're gonna that's it. Yeah, you want to tell them what the main event is today?
Yes. So me and Justin were both late on this movie, but I think I actually got a more proper viewing of it since I did watch it at home than if I would have watched it in a theater somewhere. And this movie is Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse.
Yeah, but tell me this wouldn't have been wild to see in theaters though.
It would have been. But see, movies like this, I feel like if I watch it alone, it's less comedic than I think if I would have watched it with a group of people. Because I think a lot of the elements in the movie that are there for a little breath of fresh air to take a little bit of the tension off, like William Dafoe's constant farting. I think too many people would have been laughing at that in the theater.
I was going to say, with Willem Dafoe's farts, breath of fresh air is not the right phrase there, but
I think moments like that kind of give you an ease off that tension, and I think people would have been bursting out in laughter during those parts. When I'm watching it at home by myself, I'm just like, God damn, that's disgusting. Like, it makes me like really feel for like Robert Pattinson's character. Like, man, he is with this nasty ass dude that just is like essentially shitting all over him, you know? Like,
I mean, right.
But I think if I would have watched that in the theater, people would have been laughing, you know, so it kind of might have taken me out of it.
I do want to say, though, before we get into, you know, some of the stuff we want to touch on this film, this movie came out last year. So if you haven't seen it, you don't need to listen to this episode before you watch it, because I take it this is going to be a spoiler episode, right?
Spoil McSpoil pants.
Yeah, the film's been out long enough. So spoiler warning right here, because there are just certain things we have to talk about when tearing into this film that will spoil it. So we're going to dive in now. So if you don't know, The Lighthouse was directed by Robert Eggers, who we talked a little bit last episode. His debut was The Witch, which is a fantastic film, especially for a debut. You know, I didn't expect to be blown away, given this was the directorial debut, The Witch, but it definitely was great. And I've told you this already, and you disagreed, which is good, because I want conversation about this. I enjoyed The Lighthouse more than I enjoyed The Witch, mainly because I do like that whole Lovecraftian kind of aesthetic that this film has over The Witch.
You look like a sea-man. You look like a sea. You could be a wiki.
I could. I am a wiki, and a wiki is I tell you. But I mean, The Witch is great, and I do like the whole Salem, you know, satanic, the witch aesthetic, but I like the ocean, and the beaches I like have that kind of, you know, very rocky, cold feel to them. So that and the nautical vibe was just great with me.
See, I get that, for the simple fact is that's the only reason I prefer The Witch, is not because I think the performances are better in The Witch, which the performances are great in The Witch. But obviously, I love William Dafoe. I've always loved William Dafoe and everything he's ever been in. Love William Dafoe. And Robert Pattinson's not bad either. Now that I'm seeing more of his acting outside, you know, his coming up films. You know, now that I'm seeing him do more like artsy roles and stuff, I'm gaining a whole new respect for him. But the thing about The Witch was, I love the lore, and I love the history behind the Salem witch trials, and you know, just like the Puritans and all that kind of weird shit that happened during early colonial settlements and stuff like that. Like, I love that stuff, and that's why The Witch appealed to me more. Was it a better movie? No, I just like the subject matter better.
That's fair. Yeah. And it's almost not even like I like the Lighthouse more. I guess it's kind of because even though it's the same writer and director, right, the two films are worlds apart from each other. You know, The Witch was, in my opinion, you know, just kind of typical horror cinema with the widescreen and that sort of thing. I mean, it had his own style, but then you have The Lighthouse, which is this very stylized, black and white, full screen 1-to-1 ratio, on this, you know, just secluded lighthouse island. So
right. Well, it definitely was pushing the bar of It's sort of like, do you remember when that movie Nebraska came out? That was in black and white, and that was the first
Yeah.
movie to be in black and white. That it won a lot of indie awards. I cannot remember who made that. But it won a ton of awards, and it was because it came out and it pushed, it pushed the envelope with being shot all in black and white. And this is kind of doing the same thing, like you said. It's taken a step back and shooting in a different way when most films nowadays are relying heavily on CGI and all the bells and whistles, where this is like just a character driven story shot in 4:3 black and white. You almost don't get any more bare bones than that. And that's sort of what makes it so great. It's a testament to his writing. It's a testament to the cinematographer's lighting. It's a testament to the entire crew, but I mean, the story is king here.
Definitely. So we're gonna move on to like talking about the story and stuff, but we have to shout out some of the crew before we start getting into some of the like smaller details. Directed by Robert Eggers, written by Robert and Max Eggers. Max is his brother. The cinematographer, Jaron Blaschke, is that how you would pronounce that?
Blaschke, yep.
Blaschke. So this dude, easily becoming one of my favorite cinematographers. I'll admit I didn't know who he was until The Witch. But so he was cinematographer on The Witch. He's done Souls of Totality, Down a Dark Hall, and now The Lighthouse. And it's starring Willem Dafoe, Robert Pattinson, and Valeria Karaman. She plays the mermaid in the film, and it had a budget of $4 million. That is not a big budget at all. But what they did with that budget was insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's a true testament to, knowing your story and knowing your resources. So talking about that budget, a little bit of what they did with that was a little bit of location stuff, Justin. So I didn't know this originally, like when I first watched through the movie or until I started researching it, that they actually built the entire lighthouse as well as the I guess it's the fisherman's cottage or the lighthouse keeper's cottage there. They built that entire set. I mean,
the coolest
obviously
thing about
the island was real.
Right. Well, the coolest thing about, them building that lighthouse is that Fresnel light, the Fresnel lens light that's used. Lighthouses don't use those anymore. And that is so, it was super important to have that kind of light for this time period. So they had that completely like built to be as historically accurate as possible, which, that's Robert Eggers' thing is historical accuracy.
Right. And that's sort of why they built everything, was because listening back interviews with Eggers, he was talking about they searched for the period correct or the correct looking lighthouse. And since they didn't find exactly what they wanted, they built this one, and it was essentially, the way he wanted it, but it was built out of scaffolding, I believe. So with like that fake brick facade around it. And, it's just amazing. They had the art director, Craig Lathrop, I think is how you pronounce his name. But yeah, he worked on The Witch, and he was also art director on Boondock Saints, of all movies.
So see, he's already worked with Willem Dafoe.
Right. So, so it's amazing when you start digging through IMDb credits, or you start watching certain movies and you see like these, what is it? The 8 degrees. Is it 8 degrees? 8 degrees of Kevin Bacon? Is it 8? How many degrees is it?
It's a lot of degrees.
It's a lot of degrees, but everybody's close to Kevin Bacon. Everybody's close to William Dafoe and apparently Robert Eggers, because all roads are tying back to these guys. So, super interesting, right? I mean, they shot it in 34 days.
Yep, 34 extreme days. Because it was filmed Leif Erikson Park in Cape Fortune, Nova Scotia, Canada. And the weather conditions that you see in the film, that's all real. The freezing temperatures, cold ocean, intense winds. There was snow, rain. And there are certain scenes in the film that you're just like, so like the scene where Willem Dafoe is being buried alive.
Right?
I've watched interviews and behind the scenes about that. The water that was in that hole was freezing water. It's real dirt. Funny thing. So, yeah.
How about the mud going in his mouth when when Pattinson's throwing dirt on him?
So
I'm like,
yeah. So I imagine if you're still listening, like you understand that these are spoilers, but if you're not going to watch the film and you just want to hear the spoilers, whatever, there's a scene where Willem Dafoe is being buried alive by Robert Pattinson, and the entire time he's monologuing, and dirt is legitimately going like in his mouth, and he just keeps throwing the dirt on. Katie said when we were watching this, because I'm literally fresh off my second viewing of this, she said that if that was her, she would have told the director, especially since it's black and white, to make sure that it's like crumbled up Oreos.
it's like
Yeah.
it's like the old
And
school.
I'm like,
Instead of blood, back in the black and white days, they used the like chocolate syrup. So
chocolate syrup, right? And I'm like, that would have worked, if you were like, hey, I don't want dirt. But that's the point. Willem Dafoe was like,
yeah,
hell no, throw it on there. I wouldn't have done it.
but
I probably would have been like, give
what
me
does
Oreos
it take
too.
for you to bring that
But
performance out of yourself? It takes you having this gnarly ass weather, like when Robert Pattinson's pushing the wheelbarrow and he's like licking at the rain as it's coming. Do you remember that part? That part is super weird. Yeah, so he's just like losing his mind. And he's just like,
yeah.
This is a weird comparison, but I don't know if you guys remember the Grinch movie with Jim Carrey. Do you remember that movie? They got the Grinch sitting in the chair, and they're like the Whoville people are force feeding him, but he starts like being all weird and like I don't know, like doing that same weird tongue thing that Robert Pattinson's doing, but it's like because he's just like losing his sanity, and it's the same thing with this, But I mean, this is different, but it's just the weather, like it brings out your character.
Well,
like they legitimately said that they were exhausted in most of these scenes, and Robert Pattinson, I read that he would shove his fingers down his throat to induce vomiting to make himself have this weird like somber look that he has, and he would also spin around in circles and make himself really dizzy before they would do a take, just so he would be like out of it. And I would have loved to be a fly on the wall on that set. Like,
now listen here. Right. Well, I mean, that's another thing too, talking about the location and the set. I've seen interviews where they were basically talking about if you take the camera away, then you were there. Like you were actually there. Like all of the set, all of that was real. There's a scene where the storm comes through and it floods their little, the cottage or whatever. They're really crawling around in water. Because they built all of that set up just to destroy like that. You progressively see them get more like their clothes and their bodies just becoming filthy because they're like,
well, they had real nor'easters that rolled through too during filming, like you said. So I mean, it's like you said, you're literally watching a live action play unfold in front of you if the camera's not there. I mean, that's how in character these guys were. Like Willem Dafoe, he's one of those people that does a lot of like method acting to where he stays in character on set, and he stayed in like fishermen villages and fishermen like cottages during the filming of this. And then like Pattinson, to prepare himself for this role, he decided he wasn't going to really rehearse his lines. He was just going to, he knew his lines, but he wasn't going to attend a lot of rehearsals so he could properly react to and genuinely react to William Dafoe when William Dafoe was like berating him and stuff like that, right? So he would have the proper reaction instead of it feeling like it was just acting, right? So it wasn't so monotone every time he was retorting to William Dafoe, which I thought was pretty awesome. But
Right. Well, on that too, I did see an interview with Eggers, and he was talking about, Willem Dafoe comes
right,
from a theater background, and Pattinson does not. So when they would run rehearsals with both actors, Eggers wanted them both to give 100%, and Pattinson was like, he was new to that. Willem Dafoe was used to that, but they also weren't allowed to ad-lib anything. Everything was like, by the book, what was written. How's it going, creeps? One quick mid-episode break to tell you a little more about our sponsor. Since 2016, Everblack Coffee Company has delivered exceptional single-origin coffee and high fives all over the world. They understand that a cup of coffee is so much more than something you drink. That's why they source their beans from farms that only use fair trade and organic growing practices. When you buy coffee from Everblack, you can be certain that you're getting the highest quality coffee available by ethical means only. It's time to start looking at coffee differently. Head over to everblackcoffee.com and grab a bag for yourself. It's deliciously dark. Now back to the show. And yeah, so I also just feel like that is, a testament to the writing of Robert Eggers. Let's see. He has just a very specific tone and attention to detail, but he also likes to dive into like old lore and stuff, right? He likes to research certain things. So this is actually, loosely based on real life events. So in 1801, it's called the Smalls Lighthouse tragedy. So there was these two Welsh lighthouse keepers, both of which were named Thomas. They became trapped in the lighthouse station during a storm, and one of them died, and it supposedly drove the other one absolutely mad. So there is a little bit of lore there, but it's not exactly supposed to be like a film adaptation, right? But
right. So what's so crazy about Eggers and the way he writes is I was watching. He had a talk at BAFTA, and he was essentially, I think he was giving a talk on how to write screenplays, or what his process was of writing screenplays, and he was talking about the way he writes, and he was talking simply about the opening scene where you see them arrive at the lighthouse, you see the two wikis leaving, and then them approaching the lighthouse basically to replace them, right, to relieve them of their duties. And you see that shot with William Dafoe and Pattinson just staring straight onto camera. He was saying that was easily a 4-page like detailed scene. Like he could write that in four pages of just that scene. And because he breaks it down to like the emotions that they're feeling and how they're looking, and like everything about that environment and everything that the character down to the way they're looking in great detail, down to what they're wearing in great detail, as opposed to just being like, we arrive at a lighthouse and 2 wikis are leaving to show up, and he's very descriptive about everything. And I don't know, it's pretty insane. I haven't read one of his scripts, but I will definitely be checking one out online soon, because I heard you could get the Lighthouse online. So
I want to look into this one in particular because The Witch did have, its time accurate details, especially with the dialect and stuff like that. But this film in particular, it's the 1890s, and it's not just that it's the 1890s, right? These are actual like seamen, basically. Willem Dafoe's character, Thomas Wake, whether he was telling the truth or not, he used to be a sailor or whatever, and they live the ocean life. So it's a very specific dialect that Eggers needed to research for this. So I've looked into this a little bit, and I've seen interviews with him, and he's talking about basically they discovered this novelist by the name of Sarah Orne Jewett. She was a novelist in that era, the 1890s. And when she would write, she would interview sailors and lumberjacks and people of the sort to, record their dialect, basically. And when she would write her novels, that's what she would do, is write in their dialect. And I can't remember the name right off. I should have put it in the show notes. But so there's another woman who actually wrote a thesis on Sarah Orne Jewett novels. And she basically figured out all the rules for that dialect, the syntax and when and how to say things, all the way down to little small details. Like you notice in the movie, anytime they mean to say, like what we would say, where we would put the word that, they say what. Just little things like that I picked up on. And then that's what I found is basically this novelist was, responsible for recording that kind of dialect from that area and that time period.
I mean, I fully think I'm going to start going through life instead of saying you, saying ye. So like,
Ye.
You're fond of my lobster, ain't ye? I mean, that to me
I ain't
just
got to
sounds,
say nothing.
right? Yeah, I mean, that to me, like, like, hey,
Damn
you,
ye, Winslow, damn ye.
damn ye, Winslow. So yeah, so just ye sounds so much better. So that might be how you encounter me on the streets. So
Yeah.
instead of
Or,
saying hey you, say hey ye. I'll be like, what's
Yeah.
up?
Or you could be like, if someone's threatening you and you want to ask them, if they think they're the first man to try to threaten you, and you can be like, yanked.
Yanked. Or I'll just I'll hit them with that amazing monologue about having to suck off the rust of the nails until they're sparkling clean and
No, he says until they are shiny like a sperm whale's pecker.
that's it. Yep, sperm whale's pecker. Yep.
Oh man.
So
Now
yeah,
listen
so
here.
I'm gonna hit him with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just the writing, like you said, the writing alone is, if you're not into this movie for any other reason, the writing is really what's going to take you all the way home with it. And if you're like a historian or somebody that's into historical or period piece movies, just the extreme attention to detail here. Of course, their outfits are on point. Their dialect is right, like we talked about. Their vernacular is there, but also stuff that is not necessarily seen on camera. Like they had the proper silverware and dinnerware, right? Stuff that you see that could easily be replicated, but it's stuff that I guess they sourced and they were able to find specifically for this. And they even had so much as a dustpan that was sourced for this that actually had an old sailor stamp on it. Maybe it was old Lightkeeper's stamp. So it was like an official dustpan is what I was reading that they had for this. So everything is period specific. And Eggers, on any film that he has, you're really going to get that. You're not going to just get some... when you used to see the old shots of movie backlots where they have just the facade of the building, then they have like the 2x4s holding it up and it's like a warehouse space behind it. You're not going to get that in here. He's going to go as much as he can, unless he has to build something to make it look period correct. And then you're going to get everything down from the shoes to the mustache to the buttons on the shirts of each character, just being the way it should be. And that's, you're going to get the full experience.
Yeah. Robert Pattinson had a hell of a mustache for this film.
He did. It's very Tom Selleck.
I was going to say, he definitely puts Tom Selleck and Burt Reynolds and the like to almost to shame.
You know who
game.
You know who he reminded me a lot of in this?
Who?
He reminded me a lot of Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood.
Yes.
I kept thinking.
or Jeffrey Dean Morgan in The Watchmen as the comedian.
Yeah, yeah, I could
Yep.
see that. I could see that. Um, but yeah, so like I kept thinking, which is kind of wrong, I guess, when I'm watching this movie. But it's like, man, that's so Daniel Day Lewis right there. He's giving that Daniel Day Lewis look, which I mean, to compare the two actors, that's really huge on Pattinson's part because Daniel Day Lewis is like, we all know that dude's amazing. But
Yeah.
yeah, man. So like the writing and the set design and all that, like, the cinematography was something else. It was a whole nother mountain that they climbed on this. It was nothing short of extraordinary, like just fighting the gnarly weather conditions and doing all the research to make everything period correct. I mean, the cinematographer, Blaschke, of course, he worked on The Witch with Eggers, but the way they shot this, they shot it on Panavision Millennium XL2 cameras, and they essentially went to Panavision and they had them create something custom for them. And Panavision is good at this. Like I've listened to a lot of interviews with other cinematographers. Like a lot of times people will go to Panavision just to get lenses custom made or to get Panavision's lenses and their cameras custom made to the look that the filmmaker's going for. And Panavision, it seems like a great company because I've heard nothing but great things from these cinematographers saying that when they bring these ideas to Panavision, Panavision is like all on board. They're like, hell yes, let's make this thing that you want to get your vision across. Like a lot of companies would be like, sorry, we can't do that, or oh, sorry, like you might have to go to Sony or something like that. I mean, they may not say that, but they aren't going to go out of their way as much as Panavision does for these cinematographers, and I think that's great.
Yeah, I agree. You know, you and I are, big gearheads anyway when it comes to cameras and stuff like that. So looking into the cinematography of this definitely just made me extremely happy. Like, and I imagine they were probably like kids in a candy shop because, also, when it comes to Panavision, you go and you rent the camera you want and you have their lenses, but you can also ask for off menu lenses. And, depending on the project or whatever, they'll be like, hell yeah, Tarantino's done this. I remember reading about the cinematography of The Hateful Eight. There was a lot of stuff, lenses and film stock and stuff like that were used on that film. That was extremely rare. But so some of the lenses that they got for the Lighthouse, Bosch and Lomb Baltar lenses, designed in the 30s. They had a lens from 1905 that they used for a few shots. When they needed a lot of like distortions in the footage. So definitely a lot of cool things going on. And the film, it makes you really believe that it's in this time period. So the vintage look and the texture of the film, this is according to the Hollywood Reporter. They chose to shoot with a rarely used Kodak XX 35 millimeter film. To capture a, quote, unique signature that you can't get any other way. So things like that. And he says he had some custom filters made to emulate film stock that doesn't exist anymore, that went out of production in the 1920s to pull you into the past. So, that's crazy attention to detail, not just in the writing, the acting, but even in the cinematography.
Right, and like I said, you're gonna get that full experience when you go and you see an Eggers movie, and that really sells it. I mean, and a lot of filmmakers do that. I mean, like Tarantino, he makes sure that he shoots a lot of stuff on 70 millimeter and stuff like that. For his films, like The Hateful Eight, and I believe Once Upon a Time in Hollywood screened in 70 millimeter. You're gonna get that when you have these people that have a true love for cinema and they're going to actually spend more money or fight to get that budget to shoot it the right way, as opposed to just being like, hey guys, guess what? We're shooting on a like a Alexa, or we're just, I mean, which you're not saving money by shooting on Alexa, but you're spending a whole hell of a lot of money by shooting on film, right? And tracking down these Baltar lenses and stuff like that. Just film all around is more expensive, but filmmakers that will go out of their way and spend that budget wisely, for the film, I love it.
Yep. To go back just real quick, we were talking about Tarantino. The Hateful Eight was the film negative width was 65 millimeters. So, it's stuff like that really makes certain films have the look that they do. Tarantino films have a certain look. Robert Eggers films, obviously, this is his second feature, but he's already actually, you can't even say that he technically has a look because The Witch and The Lighthouse are so different. But that's, I guess, what I love about him as a director, especially an up-and-coming new director within the last 5 years. I feel like his next film is going to be even something completely different. And, I've read different things about what his next project is going to be. He's working on some kind of Viking time period piece.
Right. I knew you'd be into that.
Yeah. And I've also heard him speaking in interviews on other podcasts or on talk shows or whatever. One of his favorite films of all time is Nosferatu.
Yeah.
And there are talks about, remaking that. And I've heard his opinion on it. I straddle the fence the same as he does. He talks about how, that film, there's certain things that you're not going to be able to recreate. But at the same time, that original film is so primitive that it almost needs like an update because, it's a front lit, play basically on camera, but for its time and what it is a masterpiece. But he said that if he does redo it, it's not, because he feels like the original needs to be redone. It's more of what that film means to him because that's one of his biggest influences and favorite films. But just throwing that out there, that'd be interesting. I don't think it's going to happen. Yeah, I would too, but I don't know if it's going to happen. I know not anytime soon. And I'd love to see him work with Willem Dafoe some more too. I've heard talks about, Willem Dafoe said he wants to work with Eggers again really bad. So we'll see how that turns out. But so there's some weird things, right, with this film.
Some weird things.
Well, there's a lot of weird things going on.
I mean, I'll spill my beans here if you want me to spill my beans right now about the weird things.
Why'd you spill your beans, Andrew?
Why'd you spill your beans? Yeah. So where to start, right? So let's talk about Robert Pattinson's masturbation scenes that came out of nowhere, right? So if you watch the movie, then you know that he finds like the Little Mermaid
trinket,
whatever, inside the sheets or inside the blanket or the pillowcase.
I think it's in the mattress. It's in the mattress. I think
it's in the mattress. Yeah, I didn't know if it was in a pillowcase or like in the pillow or something. Anyways, he finds it in the bed. Right? It's shoved down in the bed. It's from the wiki that was there before him.
The one-eyed junior man.
And he starts just masturbating to this mermaid. And this is sort of one of those things that, ends up being an Easter egg throughout the movie because when he starts slowly losing his sanity, he sees the siren, which is a mermaid. And, then he starts envisioning himself like having sex with this siren. And then you see a mermaid vagina that was like
a new one.
Right, it looks like a shark, like shark labia or shark, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's like I don't even know where to go with this. I have never seen full frontal mermaid genitalia before. Like I didn't even think that existed, but you see it in the Lighthouse.
Yep, you definitely do. There's also, so I don't know if you caught it, but Willem Dafoe has a masturbation scene as well.
Yes, he does.
And Robert Pattinson, his character, literally almost gets hit in the face because Willem Dafoe's in the actual like where the light is, and he's sitting there like wanking it, and his stuff is just dripping through the
grate,
the door, and Robert Pattinson backs up, and you just see it, and it's like, and it's gross. But
what about the scene?
Then, I mean,
what about the scene where Robert Pattinson's roofing the shingles on the house, and he looks through the little thing?
Oh, and and I couldn't tell exactly what was going on, but
I thought he was humping the bed.
Like, yeah, he was like dry humping the bed. It's weird.
So there's a lot of sexual tension happening. People are asking a lot of stuff that I've seen. People are going into like the homoeroticism of this movie, but I didn't really get that vibe. Like they were like like there was any sort of connection in between the two. Like I read a lot about that, and a lot of people are saying, there's a lot of homoeroticism to this movie, but I didn't really get that.
I don't think so. And I feel like if there was ever going to be a moment it was going to happen, it would have been during the what scene.
Well,
where he's like,
Well, I figure if it was going to happen, Eggers would have went all the way blatant with it, right? I don't feel like he would have like
he's
pushed, kind of like jumped around that. I feel like he would have made it a thing, right?
Right. Yeah. So there's masturbation, mermaid vagina. Willem Dafoe farts a lot. It was actually in the script, like flatulence.
What about the shot, Justin? That there's a bunch of like shots, a bunch of stills from this movie that I would like just a still from printed out and hanging up in the studio. And the shot of William Dafoe's profile naked with his glowing eyes looking down at Robert Pattinson.
It's like the Lighthouse eyes. Yeah,
such a sick shot. Such a sick shot. I saw that and I was like, first of all, William Dafoe's still kind of ripped, and two,
it's the Green Goblin, man.
That's Green Goblin. Shout out Green Goblin. Yeah, he kicked Tobey Maguire's ass all over the place.
He kicked him straight out of the franchise.
Straight out of the franchise. But like that shot, so weird, but it was just so killer. Like, loved it.
It was. And if you notice, like when Robert Pattinson is there for that scene to happen, like he sees the body laying on top of the lighthouse and he turns it over and it's himself.
Right.
So this is one of those like weird like hallucinations or whatever that he's experiencing.
I fully
it was an awesome shot anyway.
I fully expected as this movie played out, Justin, for it to be like all of a sudden it's like there was no Ephraim. It was always just William Dafoe by himself, or there was no William Dafoe. It was always just Robert Pattinson at the lighthouse by himself. Like, I thought for a minute that's the way the movie was going to go. I was like, okay, I see what's happening, especially when he was like, how long have we been on this rock? 2 days, 2 weeks, 5 years, or whatever the hell he says. But, like, he's like that time shift, and Robert Pattinson starts being confused of how long he's actually been there, or William Dafoe's like toying with his mind. I was like, are they the same person? What's happening? Like a secret window.
That's the thing about Eggers too, is I've seen interviews where, they were Robert Pattinson was talking about, he would ask Robert Eggers on set, well, what is this? Is this real? Whatever. And Eggers would be like, well, that's up to you. So he was like, so when we were on set, me, Robert Eggers, and Willem Dafoe, we were all three making a different movie. Because it's all up to interpretation.
That's
to
so
an extent.
rad.
Yeah, because I feel like, there could have been which one of them's real, was he even there at all? Because one thing I like to entertain is this idea of, so the ending shot when he's being eaten by the seabirds, he's laying there. What if, who's to say that he wasn't washed up to shore, right? And none of that stuff ever happened. He washed up to shore, he's unconscious, and he's being eaten alive by these seagulls. And everything that we see in the film is what he's like in his state of being like eaten alive is imagining.
Right.
So just little things like that. Eggers leaves it like it is cerebral horror to an extent. I guess you can call it elevated horror or whatever. But there's a lot to interpretation, but also you've just got to kind of watch it for what it is. It's not like there's no undertone of you're supposed to think this or supposed to feel this. It's just
It's
a
ambiguous.
thrill ride, and yeah, and it's that's why I love Eggers as a writer and a director. So, moving along a little bit. So there's some mythology, a little bit of mythology in here. Robert Eggers is all about some mythology. So speaking of the being eaten by seagulls, so there's the Grecian story of Prometheus who stole fire from the gods and he gave it to humans. This is, representative of Robert Pattinson touching the light, right? The whole film, Willem Dafoe's trying to keep him from touching the light. He doesn't want him to go, the lighthouse is mine, or the light is mine. So Prometheus was put into shackles and birds feasted on his intestines. So that was how he spent eternity. So lots of cool little things there, especially with Greek mythology.
Yeah, and the mermaid is she's reminiscent of being a siren, so that ties in directly with like Greek mythology. And when men typically answer the siren's call, sort of like when Pattinson ends up answering the call of the siren when she's laying there on the rocks, and he goes to see what's this naked body laying on the rocks, and she starts screeching. Well, he starts trying to fuck her, then she starts screeching, and then really like after that is when shit really starts hitting the fan for him. I mean, that, and also when they decide they're going to start drinking kerosene because they don't have any more alcohol. But I mean,
monkey pump. What does that even mean?
I have no clue.
But Willem Dafoe drinks the kerosene and he's like, monkey pump.
But
it almost sounded like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That's one of the Greek mythology things. And then they also talk about some of the theories I've read is how William Dafoe's character could have been Proteus from Greek mythology. He's known as the old man of the sea and essentially the son of Poseidon. So that could be why you see a lot of the tentacle imagery, and you just see him safeguarding the lighthouse. And when he starts cursing Pattinson with that enchantment of how he wants him to essentially suffocate on seawater, which is one of the fucking like most gnarly monologues that I've seen in cinema in the last since I've been alive. Yep. Right? Fucking love that. He just delivers that so hard. And like, I was researching the actual words to that, right? Seeing what it actually said, and then I read about how when he delivered that, it was basically a oneer. Like he didn't blink, he didn't take any breaths. Like he just knew those lines and he delivered them that way on like his first go, and that's so fucking amazing because like when he's saying that, like it totally had me like in my seat, like gripping. I was like, oh shit's about to get real, and then he's just like. And then Pattinson just gives him the like, like, what does he say? Something about whatever. He says, I do like your cooking or whatever.
Yeah, Willem Dafoe delivers this entire monologue of damn ye Winslow, hark Triton, hark, let Neptune strike ye dead, and then goes into this like detailed, let the sea, let you. The very remnants of your soul become the sea, blah, like all this really deep stuff, and then Pattinson just goes, all right, have it your way. I like your cooking.
Right?
Yeah. But I mean,
fucking love
this
that.
film is just, we could talk for hours and hours more about this, but this episode is already extremely long, and I just feel like this is a film I'm definitely going to rewatch again. I've seen it twice already, but there's so much to just enjoy.
There's so much to
film.
unpack here, like so much, like so many like theories you can go into, so much lore you can explore. So we don't have enough time, Justin, to talk about this movie. That's how serious this is. Like, guys, if you haven't seen this, or if you have seen this, show it to somebody. And like you said, It's something to revisit.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to appreciate about it. The cinematography, the writing, the dialogue. Watch it with subtitles. Watch it one time without subtitles, one time with subtitles. Because sometimes it can be hard to follow. But ending 30 seconds. You want to throw anything else out there? I know that we've talked about a lot, but there's so much more that could be said.
Yeah, so like I said, just when you watch a Robert Eggers movie, you know that you're going to get the full experience. He's going to go out of his way and make his life harder to deliver you 100% authenticity and 100% great story. And you know that he's not about to cast some whack-ass actors in his movies. He's going to have these people that can deliver these performances. Last thing I want to say is, you're fond of my lobster, ain't ye? That's it.
Yep. So that's going to wrap it up for us today, guys. That's episode 2 of Cinema Creep. Go check out the Lighthouse. Check us out on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And thanks for listening. We will catch you guys next week.
See ya.